Hey, everybody. Thank you for tuning in. My name is Colleen. I am part of Local 70 in Oakland, California. I'm a part-time UPSer working at the Oakland Airport on the ramp. Today, I am joined by my comrades and fellow workers. We are part of Teamsters Mobilize, and we are reporting on our experience at the TDU convention this past month. To share just a little bit about Teamsters Mobilize, we are a grassroots organization of Teamsters activists really trying to build up worker power in our union against our employers, their cronies. We'll work tirelessly to expose Teamster leadership and build slowly, brick by brick, a genuine fighting labor movement in our country. We started in 2022 as a caucus of UPS part-timers, a classification that has historically been neglected by both the company and Teamsters leadership, bearing the brunt of divide and rule tactics for far too long. But we also hope that Teamsters Mobilize can eventually grow beyond that. And we saw, especially in the last contract campaign, that when it came to trying to fight for more, it definitely wasn't only part-timers taking a stance and joining up in our efforts. So with that, let's, if everybody could introduce yourselves. We will start with Jennifer.
Good evening. My name is Jennifer Hancock. I'm a part-time UPS warehouse worker. I've been with UPS for 32 years, and I am out of Richmond, Virginia, local 322. Thanks.
Great. And we can pass it to Kat.
Hey everyone, my name's Kat. I work also at the Oakland Airport with Colleen in Local 70. I'm a shop steward also along with Colleen, and I have worked at UPS for a little over a year now.
Great. And how about Tony?
Hey everyone, my name's Tony. I'm a UPS part-timer out of Seattle, Washington, a member of Local 174. I'm just coming up on the end of my first year at UPS. I'll pass it on to Chantel.
Hi, my name is Chantel. I'm a UPS part-timer, part-time sorter in Local 177 North New Jersey. And I've been working at UPS since last year. And that leaves Jess.
Hey, my name is Jess Lister. I am out of Local 728. I am the shop steward on the Griffin, Georgia preload, also the shifter, and I've been a steward for a little over 4 years. Proud member of Teamsters Mobilize.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. And so basically, how we're going to go through today, we've worked together on some questions to sort of guide our discussion, which I'll ask and we'll all sort of chime in. I think it's been, for those who are, closer into the fold, it's been no secret that there have been, maybe some rifts here and there between TM and TDU. And I just want to make clear before we get started that, that is not our approach. TDU itself doesn't post any minutes of what went on at the convention. And we believe that there are some pretty important moments that took place that garner like discussion and debate within the labor movement and as workers more broadly. And that in general, there's a really long history of this being very necessary to do in order to advance our struggle and not just be putting a Band-Aid over a bullet hole over and over again. And sharing disagreements on what we should do for the path forward towards liberation is a sign that we do want to work together. And oftentimes, a lot of sort of critique and criticism can get smeared as gossip. And myself and everyone here does not see the situation that way. So I just wanted to open up and frame this recording as such. And also that even when we do share our disagreements, that, you know, all workers or Teamsters and those who are at the convention, it's still we still have a lot in common. You know, we're both still exploited by these awful companies and the capitalists more broadly. So it is in our best interest to work together, and I wanted to leave it on that as well. So with that being said, how about we'll start off with, you know, where and why did Teamsters Mobilize form, and how did we emerge out of TDU? Go ahead, Jennifer.
I want to stress that all Teamster Mobilize grew out of TDU. All of the original founders of Teamster Mobilize were TDU members. We met through TDU. In fact, we met on a part-timer WhatsApp chat that we put together after the 2021 TDU convention. So how we ended up going on the path that we are currently on, one of our members put out a call around July of 2022 asking for folks who might be interested in organizing around part-timer issues for the upcoming contract campaign. So we got together. We started meeting on Zoom every week, talking about part-timer issues and what we wanted to see in the upcoming contract campaign, and how could we get all that out to the rest of the part-timers across the entire country. So coming up to the 2022 TDU convention, we decided that we were going to put forth a resolution for a part-timer caucus. We wanted to work under the TDU umbrella. As I said, we were all TDU members. And we felt that that would probably be the best way for us to reach part-timers across the country so we could talk about the issues that impacted part-timers. Unfortunately, it didn't go down like that. TDU is not interested in focusing on any one company. They have a very broad strategy of working towards training shop stewards and organizing shop floor organizers. They are not interested in focusing on one company, which, considering all the systematic problems that part-timers have in the workplace, kind of left us, out in the cold, essentially. So we decided after the 2022 TDU convention that we were going to continue working towards part-timer issues around the contract campaign, and that's where the beginning of Teamsters Mobilize came from.
Kind of just to pick up a little bit where Jennifer left off, because all that was prior to me finding Teamsters Mobilize. One of the very early members of Teamsters Mobilize, Matt, put me on to TM. I was already had a pretty active part in the contract campaign and my shop. And so I was just overjoyed to find a group of people that were very similar to myself that really wanted to take action. So that was really empowering to find, especially at the time, when a lot of what I was doing in my local as a partner, I was confused. So I was really glad to find that. And, we organized, we had a lot of different campaigns really during the contract, just pushing forward a lot of issues that we were hoping to see once a TA was released. Unfortunately, we did not get a lot of the demands that we had hoped to get. So we organized a national Vote No campaign. We were the voice of opposition. We were the voice of dissent. We really wanted to empower people to stand up and push for more. We feel like a lot was left on the table, and we wanted to empower people to really push back against thinking that that you could just settle for whatever problems these corporations give. So I was very proud to be part of that national vote.
Yeah, I think I mean, we were the leading up the Vote No campaign, and it was a question I think that was on a number of people's minds who have been involved in TDU, which is kind of like, where's TDU right now in terms of the contract? Why are they not taking a Vote No stance? Whereas obviously in many previous contracts they had done that. They had criticized corrupt practices by union leadership, like the non-disclosure agreements and the brownouts, concessions given to the company, but then not so in this contract. In this contract, the TDU leadership didn't criticize O'Brien Zuckerman leaders' decisions, the negotiating committee's decisions at all. Whereas, the rest of us were wondering, like, well, why is there a brownout? After all this talk about transparency, and that's why they were running and stuff like that. That's why TDU was supporting them. So I think we also, saw that there was like a desperate need to lead a Vote No campaign, and we saw that unfortunately, the TDU leadership was not doing that.
So why did we attend to go to the TDU convention this year, and what did we hope to achieve?
I will list the fluffiest reason possible. I wanted to get a chance to meet all of y'all in person. Week after week of seeing y'all on Zoom, and it was wonderful to get the chance to meet everyone in person. It was worth it entirely for that alone, for me.
Yeah, for a long time, TDU has functioned as a watchdog organization within the Teamsters Union. As you mentioned earlier, Colleen, TDU has been known for pushing broad positive reforms within the Teamsters Union, such as one member, one vote in union elections, opposing top union leadership plundering the union, which has happened many times in the Teamsters history, and also demanding transparency in contract negotiations. We spoke a little bit earlier about how TDU has stepped back from some of these positions that it's taken historically, but for these reasons, the TDU convention and TDU as an organization draws together a lot of Teamsters workers that want to come together and advance the struggle of workers within the Teamsters Union. So, we were hoping to meet and link up with a lot of these fellow Teamsters workers throughout the country. And the TDU convention brings together a lot of those people. And as Jennifer talked about earlier, many of us are TDU members, so we came to participate in the democratic life of the organization and bring forward resolutions. We'll get into this a little bit later, the resolutions in particular. But generally just to meet people and to make connections.
Yeah, and I think like back, some people might be like, see us roll in with some shirts and be a little confused of like, you are dissatisfied with certain lines that TDU has taken. You made your own organization. Like, why'd you guys come here? Why don't you just stay in your own lane? But I think it all does circle back to the sort of opening points I made, and we will throughout this, is that we do have a common and shared interest with all workers and those in attendance, and we will need to work with each other even despite disagreements. And we definitely weren't there just to siphon off people to recruit to Teamster Mobilize. And I think, that's made clear by our involvement in the convention overall. And I think we all, either we're members or know plenty of TDU members who have taught us really important things, and as far as with standing up to the boss and Before, in the lead up to the convention, several of us did face some hostility from the top two appointed leaders, Ken Path and David Levine. And I would, yeah, who wants to speak to how two members were barred from attending the convention?
I'm happy to do that. I know actually Colleen had received some phone calls before I ever got a phone call from the TDU leadership about, so maybe Colleen, you can talk about that in a little bit, of just some, kind of intimidation about how we couldn't hand out any kind of materials about Teamsters Mobilize. It wouldn't really be a good idea to put forward resolutions. My own experience is that, we as a group decided, a while ago that we were going to attend the TDU convention. I was looking forward to participating. But then I received a phone call, I think a week before the convention, and I'd registered a few weeks before that. And it was from David Levine, who I'd never met or talked to before. But he called me to say that he kind of gave me a series of reasons why I could not attend the TDU convention. First, he said that I had, not emailed back when they emailed me after I registered asking for my local. And I said, oh, well, I ended up sending you the information. And he said, well, it's too late now, even though at this point registration was fully still open. And then he said, oh, well, this isn't a convention that's open to the public. And I said, well, I'm not just like a random person wanting to attend. I'm a Teamster, I work at UPS. That was clear already. And then he said I had to be a TDU member, even though that's also not the case, that you have to be a TDU member to attend. And then finally, actually, we got to the point where he said, oh, well, you in particular have criticized TDU because I had written an article of like a Marxist analysis of the UPS contract struggle, why it's important to organize to vote no, and also analyzing kind of the history of TDU as an organization, why I had some disagreements with their line that, there should be no talk of politics in the union struggles. But anyway, so I guess he read that article and said that because of that, it was very clear I had no good intentions wanting to attend. I was calling for the downfall of TDU or something along those lines. I really tried to make clear, I have disagreements and criticisms, but I'm serious about wanting to attend. I've met a lot of people who have been like very active in the union who are TDU members who have encouraged me to go. I'd like to go. I want to put forward resolutions, stuff like that. And then he said it was a waste of time to talk. He wanted to make sure I didn't go out there because I definitely would not be able to attend. And then that was that for me. In terms of them banning me. And then maybe I'll also just speak briefly about another member of Teamsters Mobilize who's not on the call tonight, but she also was planning on attending. It was pretty much confirmed with the TDU leadership. They were going to help make sure she could attend kind of financially. But then at the very last minute, basically the same day they had called me, they told her that she could not, she couldn't attend. They'd already like ordered the food and it was impossible for them to like add another person. She's also someone, who's involved obviously in Teamsters Mobilize. She was involved in the Vote No campaign and in standing up against corrupt union leadership, which included, criticizing stances that TDU has taken. So they wouldn't let her attend. So two of us who have been involved with TM were banned. Me and more clearly in her, it wasn't as explicit, but they wouldn't let her attend.
And then for like myself, I was, so originally when we were deciding that we should go, I did reach out to us, a staffer and asked them if we could maybe have like a workshop or a table as Teamster Mobilize. And, they said no, due to similar reasons that Chantel laid out, that why would they let us do as such? We apparently, yeah, they said no. So then following that, sometime later, time goes by, and then I was getting phone calls from Ken, just sort of in the week leading up, like asking if we are going to have any materials, that we are not allowed to bring any materials. And then he did start sort of fishing to see sort of whether I agreed or not with the article that Chantel and another Teamster Mobilize member had written, but it wasn't a public endorsed statement at all by our organization. So he's trying to figure out like where I stand, and also threatened me at one point of rescinding my registration and my ability to go, under some paranoia that after Chantel, this is after Chantel had already been officially barred, that maybe we would potentially like protest the convention, have some sort of outside inside strategy. I reassured him we weren't going to do that. And then, I was allowed to go, but it definitely was sort of this like cat and mouse game, so to speak. And that was I really felt a very like warm welcome. And then, so how about now that we've made it to the convention, how was the attitude of TDU leadership towards us once we got there? If people can speak on that one.
Yeah, I'll get us started on that. So obviously, Chantel, Colleen, those that were barred, those that were called by TDU leadership before the convention, obviously all of Teamsters Mobilize was told about TDU barring some of our members from attending. So we came to the convention kind of under this cloud of these threats of being barred. For instance, in Ken Paff, who's a founding member of TDU, member of or part of the leadership. In Ken Paff's call to Colleen, he said, Teamsters Mobilize is not allowed to bring any sort of literature, any flyers, anything to the TDU convention. So yeah, there's quite a air of intimidation surrounding our presence there. Yeah, we were told we shouldn't bring forward any resolutions, even though this TDU convention is supposedly, highest decision-making body of TDU, and they want to encourage if membership in the organization. Yeah, despite those claims, we were told we shouldn't bring forward resolutions, and that we shouldn't bring forward literature to distribute at the convention. So all this was hanging over our heads as we attended.
Yeah, I think people painted a pretty clear picture of the kind of like overt repressive measures that we faced, and the air of hostility, sometimes more or less explicit. I think it's also interesting to note that that wasn't necessarily like the case across the board. There's some people pretty high up in TDU who I think saw the need to maybe play like nicer with us, or try to sort of, not totally shut us down, but maybe file down the edges or say, you guys, you have like a nice, like youthful spirit, but you kind of just need to wait and play the game, work the system, don't really speak up too loudly. But of course, I agree with you, but I'm not going to say that out loud. I'm just going to say that quietly, like to the side. So I think that was also another kind of like strategy that we observed from some of these leading figures. And it's just important to note, I think in general, as union activists, that there is going to be a variety of ways that people respond to workers standing up and naming what we see that isn't right and trying to fight for better, and not to get kind of caught up when there's these different kind of strategic approaches in that respect.
People speak to okay, there's the attitude from the TDU leadership at the convention, but like what was the attitude of the like TDU members, who you all met and spoke with?
So yeah, we talked a little bit briefly about, did we want to go to the TDU convention at all? Because even within Teamsters Mobilize, we still have some members that are over it. They say they can no longer stomach TDU. They're not going. I respect that. I had not been to a convention previously, so I didn't even really know exactly what it was like. I know that a lot of people attend. I made a lot of connections with people during the last year, who I otherwise probably would not meet in person. So, it was a place where a lot of people were gathering. I wanted to go talk to people, make connections, see what kind of education was offered in the workshops. And we thought that it was important that our presence be there. We believe that if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And that is how it's been for part-timers for a very long time. And those voices are very important and very needed in all of these spaces where Teamsters are. So for that reason, we felt like it was important to be there. And we actually at that point discussed, do we want to run someone for a steering committee? We decided then that we didn't. We really didn't want to pull any energy away from Teamsters Mobilize. That was our main concern. Later on, as the convention got closer, I gathered a little more information and realized that the workload of what a steering committee member would take on was not that large of a workload, and decided that worst case scenario, I'd come back from the convention the same way I went, not on the steering committee. So I decided to run for steering committee. So that was part of our experience there as well. We did flyer for my nomination for steering committee. We got a lot of support. There were people that took stacks of flyers to also help distribute. A lot of people said they were voting for me. I did not get elected to the steering committee. The only thing that I think would be nice to see would be like an actual tally of how many votes each person got. I think that could help, like an analysis of how much support you actually had on paper. How many people actually voted for you? How much support did you have? And I'm sure that anybody would like to see that. Did they get 10 votes or did they get 100? So it just gives you a little bit of feedback. So I think that would be nice to see as well. And just for transparency purposes, just to see that the process is actually unfolding as it should. People like to see that and know that things are on the up and up.
We experienced a lot of overt repression from the TDU leadership, and then also some of the TDU leadership, kind of whispering to us that they support us, but think that we should, kind of stand down and be more passive participants in the convention. Many of the TDU membership were very positive as to our presence at the convention. One moment that I want to highlight is during the UPS contract enforcement workshop led by TDU staff director David Levin. There was a raise of hands at the beginning of the workshop. Raise your hand if you voted yes on the contract. Raise your hand if you voted no, and it was about half and half. So there were many TDU members who actually diverged from TDU leadership's position in the Vote No campaign, in the contract campaign, whereas TDU, pushed a vote yes along with the IVT leadership. Many of the TDU membership actually voted no.
Which should be put in context of the overall vote, which was more like a 80-20 in favor. But now, okay, we're looking at like these pretty, active, passionate members of Teamsters who are generally more engaged in the more detailed, nuanced questions of these campaigns. And actually, the ratio is pretty different. I think it's important to see that 80-20 number in the context of what was going on the ground, which is that people were getting text messages from the union saying to vote yes. The mail ballot form kind of also was explicitly pushing people to vote yes. So that was the context that we were working in, and I think that this point Tony's making is kind of poke some holes in that narrative of how the vote actually turned out.
Yeah, thanks for adding that, Kat. Yeah, so my overall point is that TDU membership, we had a very positive experience at the convention with TDU membership. Many people were very interested in what we are doing as Teamsters Mobilize. We're in support of our efforts in the Vote No campaign for the 2023 contract.
And yeah, and I think that is a helpful way to sort of look at sort of the dividing lines between like when we critique like an organization's like overall stance and then those within it, and that we do clearly like see the difference here. And so then the other major part of the convention was the resolutions that we raised, and we could speak a little bit of how that went. Maybe if somebody wants to start off with like how we collectively wrote like 5 or 4, and sort of how difficult it was to even go through the process, and how that was for us, and then we can work our way, I guess, towards like some of the more particular points.
Yeah, to start us off, I just want to highlight again that Teamsters Mobilize members received calls from TDU leadership saying, if you try to bring forward resolutions, no one's going to vote for them. So that's some of the context that we had going into the convention. We didn't bow down to that intimidation, and we decided to bring forward the resolutions anyway. But to start us off on this question, it was kind of difficult to understand the process for how to bring forward resolutions. Even many of us who have been TDU members for a few years weren't sure or had not seen the process of resolutions being brought forward at the convention. We even asked some TDU steering committee members, how can we bring forward our resolutions that we prepared? And they weren't exactly sure. So this raised some questions of like, you know, isn't the TDU convention the highest decision-making body of the organization? You know, the convention, the place where membership brings forward resolutions to be debated on the floor and adopted by the organization. So that was just some context for our resolutions that I wanted to highlight.
Yeah, I mean, so we decided ahead of time that we were going to attend the convention, and we wanted to meet people, other activists, gain what kind of knowledge and experience that we could from the different workshops, but then also put forward resolutions, for TDU as an organization to actually take a stand. And some people had said to us, like, that doesn't really happen at the conventions. It's kind of a time for like people to meet up and like learn some stuff, but then go their separate ways. TDU's not really taking like many political stances or really launching kind of big campaigns now. But we think it should be. So we discussed a lot of different issues that we could potentially put forward, but then ended up settling on things that we thought really affected Teamsters, like across companies and job positions, things that are really like quite crucial to change within the Teamsters Union, and in order to actually be able to push forward our struggle. So as for like what we had settled on, which I know others are going to talk about, actually putting those forward and stuff like that. But we settled on open bargaining, and that TDU should support open bargaining for all Teamsters contracts, including doing what they had done before in terms of calling for an end to NDAs. We pointed out the fact that, the IBT negotiating committee under Sean O'Brien did sign the NDAs this year, again, leading to like another brownout. And also all of these resolutions are on our website. People can find them if you're interested in reading them. We had one on pay parity, so equal, pay and benefits for equal work, which, is a pretty important thing for us as, part-timers, but is just a huge issue across the workers in Teamsters, but more broadly in terms of all these different tiers and divisions amongst us, that obviously benefit the companies, but then also that, union leadership, not just our own, but across other unions have happily agreed to in previous contracts. And then we also decided, given like the month leading up to the convention, with the just brutal Israeli war on Palestine, particularly in Gaza, that we and especially the role of the United States in supporting Israel and backing it economically and politically and militarily. We had a resolution calling for the TDU to take up a call on all of our leadership in Teamsters to call for a cessation of any more U.S. military aid to Israel, as well as calling for a ceasefire. So yeah, that's just like a little bit about the resolutions that we did end up kind of finalizing and putting forward for the convention. I'm so sorry, I'm going to say one more thing, which is just that, it's important, of course, to have like basic education on what's in our contract, what are our rights as union members, as workers more generally, how to be, how to file grievances, how to, organize your coworkers, how to be a shop steward, all that. Education is important, but, we're called Teamsters Mobilize because we want to actually like mobilize and organize our coworkers and, not just people in Teamsters Mobilize, but like across our union. So that is why, even though I guess it wasn't so common for there to be many resolutions at the convention, we decided to put forward multiple ones.
Yeah, so Friday morning, the first morning of the convention, we were all in a van headed over there to the convention, and we were all talking, and there was a little bit of a mix-up because we talked about taking the resolutions from 3 down to 2. And the one that ended up getting dropped essentially was our resolution on pay parity. And I did not identify this until we were in the room getting ready to read resolutions. And I was looking for Jennifer because she was going to read our pay parity resolution. And that's when it occurs to me that like, oh, like that's the one we're not reading. And within 5 or 10 minutes, like I knew that like we had to bring forward the pay parity resolution. I feel like what brought us together, one of our most central core struggles is wages. Like our wages have been second class since the 80s. And that's only for UPS Teamsters. Like Chantel brought up, this is not just a Teamster problem. This is a working class problem in general. All these big corporations like to gigify as much work as they possibly can, to pay people less, give people less in benefits, give people less in retirement. Part-time labor is not worth less than full-time labor just because the amount of hours you work. We are all Teamsters. We all work hard. That is not up for debate. We all work hard. We all are part of moving packages from point A to point B. We all deserve to be paid well. 25, our fight for 25, we felt like that was the absolute minimum. That's why we put it there. We think we deserve more than that. We think we deserve to be paid as much as our full-time counterparts. Years of service is years of service. But that's what we based our fight on. That's what we thought was attainable for the bare minimum. And we based most of our campaign around that. You know, we even came up with the slogan, 25 is the low or we vote no. So we knew that we were looking for 25 as a bottom line. So, you know, when we see that, that's when we really, you know, we knew we probably weren't going to see that, just because of the way things were going and the fact that the IBT was taking no stance. They would not commit to any kind of number. Everything was very vague. They like to say part-timers over and over. But as far as that goes, that's all they really did. They said they wanted to do a whole lot for part-timers and they didn't. So pay parity is extremely important to all of us and, you know, kind of where our heart lies and like what brought us together. So I just did not want that one to be dropped. So I immediately left the room to go and get these printed. The business center there at the hotel was out of service the whole time. So everything you wanted to do, you had to do through the front desk. They were having email issues, then printer issues. I finally get a stack in my hand. And when I go to head back to the room, everybody's walking out. So that's when I found out that they did not let the resolutions be read at that time. They said that they would be read on Sunday at the very end of the convention. So I said, okay, who's got the other two? Like I need to go get that person, this third one. I need to get this in their hands as soon as I can to let them know, like, you know, there was a little bit of a mix up amongst us. That's why you didn't get this one when you got the other two. So we spend about 10 minutes looking everywhere for Sean Orr that has the other two resolutions. When we weren't able to find them, my fear was that they were in a room someplace discussing this already, that they had already gathered with the two. So we round a corner and Sean Orr and Sean Williams are basically coming to find us. They have the other two. And I go ahead and just jump right in. And I said, you know, we actually have a third resolution. There was a little bit of a mix up. You know, I'm sorry you didn't get it at the same time, but this is on pay parity. This is why we feel it's so important to us, as I just discussed. And I was very passionate about it. Sean Orr was very cold. He shot me down. Every reason that he gave for why I basically debunked. He first said that it was untimely. And I explained that, you know, the whole process of how to do this, when to do this, where the information was. It was all very difficult to find. And, you couldn't really claim untimely as, there was no information anywhere. And, the meeting, we weren't going to read them until the next afternoon. And then he said that we don't do stuff that's industry specific. But the actual resolution, it is not industry specific. It talks about the working class in general. John Deere is mentioned in there. The big three, UAW is mentioned in there. And so that wasn't true that it was industry specific. He then tells me that if he takes it to the steering committee, that they'll vote no. And I said, fine. I said, take the paper. I said, take it and get me a no. That's all I'm asking. He would not take the paper from me. He had no sympathy. He was just, the whole interaction was very cold and very cruel, and he had no compassion whatsoever. And he would not take the paper. I asked Sean Williams, I said, will you please take the paper? Just go get me a no. I know you guys are going to meet again before tomorrow. And then he went from that to, on behalf of the steering committee, I'm telling you no. So he made that executive decision to not accept and not allow us to read that resolution on pay parity that is so important for the working class as a whole. And in turn told us that we had 3 minutes total to read the other two, that's what they were going to allow us at the close of the convention on Sunday.
Tony has asked me to briefly speak on TDU's call for part-timer pay during the contract campaign. Teamster Mobilize had started working on our own slogan. This is probably around December or January, for the 25-75-5 slogan that y'all may have seen around different places, but Jess mentioned the 25 to survive. That was part of that. On Martin Luther King Day, TDU sent out a petition with a whole list of different things that folks should be agitating for with the campaign, the contract campaign. They had actually put on there $30 an hour for part-timers. I remember this because I could have literally driven to Detroit and started kissing all of the TDU staff, because we went from 25 is, they're never going to pay y'all 25. That's too much. 20, quit, get another job. Every single comment that I'm sure everyone has heard about why part-timers should not be paid what the work they do is worth. So that disappeared pretty quickly. You couldn't find it anywhere. They took at one time I still had a link to the petition, but unless you had the actual link, you couldn't find it. And they may have taken that down by now. Jess has mentioned in the past that she ordered TDU materials for shop floor organizing, and they mentioned $25 an hour for part-time pay. That also disappeared. By the time we got up to the actual TA, there was nothing on any of the TDU website or materials about part-time pay, just higher part-time pay, I think is what it said.
Yeah, and you spoke, Jess, about how this is really a pervasive issue across a lot of different workplaces and industries and stuff, and I really agree with that. I mean, I think TDU itself was really strong behind the get rid of the 22.4 tier. We know that these tier systems are a way to divide and conquer us. That's not a mystery. That's not a secret. There's really no controversy around that idea. But then when it comes to actually trying to formalize that in a plan of action that we're committing to through this resolution, the answer is no, because you didn't submit it on time. Like, what? And I think we have to get together and figure out a more concrete strategy for how to get rid of the tier system at UPS. It's not just going to happen because we all go out and do a practice picket for a day. You know, that's going to be a huge fight. And we can't do that if we don't start laying some pretty solid groundwork and if we don't have a roadmap of how we're going to get there. So I think you know, this was a pretty revealing experience, but we're not giving up the fight. You know, we're still in it. One fall in a pit, gaining your wit, so to speak.
Yeah. I also wanted to highlight that the TDU Constitution used to explicitly say used to contain a Bill of Rights, which included like a resolution to oppose tiers. But this was removed, I believe, at the 2022 TDU convention from the Constitution. So yeah, it's absolutely critical that we if TDU doesn't has given up this stand on opposing tiers, that organization like Teamsters Mobilize takes that up and carries it forward. Yeah, compare that previous stand that TDU had taken opposing new tiers to TDU stand during the UPS contract campaign, in which TDU is silent on the new tier that was introduced in this contract for part-timers. You know, they hailed, you know, the victory of the elimination of the 22-4 driver tier from the contract, but we're totally silent on the new pay tier for part-timers, with any part-timer starting or reaching seniority after August 1st, 2023, having a greatly reduced pay scale over the course of 5 years. Yeah, so I wanted to highlight that.
Yeah, they don't talk about the unborn tier when there was all that propaganda going around of how much this like has been the biggest increase in wages since like the 80s, or you know, all the boasting about how you know, boasting about how we should just be like so happy for what we got, and completely like detextualizing like what that dollar amount really counts for in connection to like the outside world. I was going to speak on kind of some of what unfolded when we were presenting the resolutions, but Tony, did you want to speak?
Yeah, I'd like to speak on that too. Feel free to fill in whatever I miss. But so Teamsters Mobilize members came forward with the 2 resolutions out of the 3 that we had intended to bring. The slot that we were relegated to speak, as was mentioned earlier, was only 3 minutes on these 2 resolutions, which we thought was pretty egregious.
There were no other resolutions, right? It's not like there were 20
yes,
resolutions, so we had to keep
that's
it really
right.
tight.
That's right. The only other resolution that was brought was from the TDU steering committee itself, which was a pretty vague resolution for TDU to continue in the next year to organize the Teamsters rank and file without many stands really taken. And you know, that was passed, you know, unanimously or whatever. So this was the only other resolution that was, these 2 were the only other resolutions brought forward. And yeah, it seemed ridiculous that we were only given 3 minutes, and these 3 minutes were given in the final session on Sunday, when maybe only a fourth of the convention attendees were still there in the building. Many had already left. So yeah, we brought forward these resolutions under all this pressure from the TDU leadership and intimidation. Hoping that we could bring these resolutions before the floor and they could be discussed and debated among the TDU membership and then voted on whether they would be adopted or not. But instead, the TDU convention committee, which is a 3-member committee set up to carry out the convention, a member motioned to table both of the resolutions. And for those that don't know, tabling means and table indefinitely. There is no time limit given for the resolutions to be brought before the convention again. So the motion was made by the TDU leadership to table the resolutions, meaning they shouldn't be discussed. They won't be discussed before the body. They won't be voted on whether they would be adopted. And unfortunately, a motion to table these resolutions is not allowed to be debated. So effectively, any discussion or debate among the convention was cut off, and a simple vote was taken to whether or not to table the resolutions, and that vote passed. Colleen, if you want to speak more.
Yeah, I think it's worth like trying to illustrate a little bit more of like what did happen within the vote itself, and then also as much as there wasn't so much debate, like we weren't able to offer a debate of why these things should be pushed. There were clear stances put as to why it should be tabled. So after I read them out loud, a TDU member had like gone up to the mic to argue for like why these should be tabled. With the open bargaining one, which mind you, after I read it, there was a big roar. We did pick that one intentionally because we just heard from Teamsters, like regardless of your political leaning, like that was a big demand. So we went through with it, and then the argument for tabling that one was pretty much like nobody would disagree with this. No one would disagree with open bargaining, but this doesn't make any sense. Why would we put forward like no resolution will like bring rank and file members like clarity of like what's put on a contract, like that's up for the rank and files who are on the negotiating committees, and like it's all at the rank and file. That's where all the power comes from. Like almost trying to like flip us like on our head as to like it was such a convoluted like argument, because ultimately like we do want to know like what the Teamsters is like offering, like of course offering like how far are they going at the table. That's important for us to know. And yeah, so I thought that was pretty interesting. Then more importantly, on the second one, when we read calling a demand for a ceasefire and for the United States to end funding the Israel military, which is pretty much entirely funded by the U.S. and developed by the U.S. There was this pretty like profound speech along the lines of the fact that TDU has been around for almost 50 years. And in those 50 years, we've always kept like politics separate from the workplace. And which is like really funny because, by nature, there's a very political aspect to everything that goes on with our labor. And this whole entire like economic system is built off of our exploitation. And when we go to work every single day, all of the profits like generated from our oppression are then used to fund wars, for example. And this is like a really kind of simple, like bare-boned outline I could go more in depth with. But so yeah, it's pretty ironic that like a Teamsters for a Democratic Union, or even unions more broadly, like not even like reform caucuses, but the Teamsters proper also takes this stand that we shouldn't get involved with sort of outside politics as workers. And it's pretty egregious to me that these bodies that are supposed to work in the interest of workers like takes these like neutral stands, and almost like it's so laughable to even try and make the point that like politics need to be kept separate from our very lives, when this whole entire like capitalist system relies on us being just shorted in so many ways. So it's pretty laughable. And so I think that it was pretty important for that member to make this like point as like loud and proud as he did, despite the fact that I disagree with it, because I think that when that is shared out in the open, we can begin to see like clearer dividing lines. And if that's how TDU's been for almost 50 years, and it's like principally gonna like stick that way, I think that Ken Path could be like blue in the face, saying that when you keep these things separate, even amidst like World War III or something pretty egregious like that.
Yeah, I wanted to say that this resolution that we brought forward, is not some aberration in the U.S. labor movement either. This is in the context of many other unions and union members across the country bringing forward resolutions demanding a ceasefire, demanding the end of military aid to Israel as it carries out this genocide against the Palestinian people, murdering up to over 16,000 people now, civilians. So this is not some aberration in the labor movement. This is happening across labor movements across the whole world, including the United States. Yeah. I also wanted to note that the motion to table these resolutions was brought forward by a prominent TDU member, Frank Halstead, who's a member of the TDU convention committee at this convention.
Who also made those comments that Colleen was describing.
That's right. Yeah. Who said that there's no point to us passing an open bargaining resolution. The only way that we can win open bargaining is through rank and file organization. Totally contradicting TDU's previous open stance against open bargaining, against non-disclosure agreements. And then secondly, he also made the comment that politics should be separate from the labor movement, which we've already discussed that we disagree with. I'll pass it to Chantel.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I mean, you know, if unions are like us as workers being organized, right? Like, well, not even all UPS workers are in the Teamsters, but still, like, we should be fighting, yeah, for things like that affect our kind of working conditions and situation. Even that, I guess these TDU convention members voted to table like open bargaining. That's just like egregious. I can't see any justification for that. Like if this is supposed to be an organization pushing for rank and file demands, and then you say, oh, you need to organize the rank and file for this demand, not here. It's like, well, what is this convention for? I mean, I think it's no surprise that, you know, the TDU backed like the Oz slate. And when the Oz slate did the NDA, okay, then TDU leadership decided, let's not actually bring up this kind of this situation. But yeah, I just really agree with what others have said about like why it's really not the case that we can keep like this kind of economic and political kind of spheres separate. First of all, Colleen was mentioning like how oftentimes some of the TDU leaders, as well as our union leaders, will say like, let's be neutral in politics. But sometimes they're not neutral. They very much push actually for all of us to be donating, you know, for like electoral campaigns. Sean O'Brien said Joe Biden was like the most pro-labor president ever. You know, actually giving lots of support to the politicians of like the capitalist parties, of like the Democrats and the Republicans, and saying that for our political interests, we just need to look to the politicians. So yeah, that was one thing I was thinking. And then just, yeah, I think it's like so important that we're putting forward within organizations like TDU, within our unions, like what actually is in our interests as workers, not what the capitalists are telling us, not what, you know, our union leadership is telling us just by virtue of them being our union leadership. You know, it's a little more maybe straightforward that something like open bargaining does benefit the workers, the members of the unions. But also we thought it was very important to put forward that, you know, the US government, you know, the media, you know, many union leaders are trying to tell us that actually Israel waging war on Palestine and US support for that is something that's good for us, like as the US workers, as the US working class. And I mean, they try to sell us all kinds of things like this and, you know, support for US imperialism in all its various forms. And I think, I mean, yeah, it's absolutely crucial that we oppose that. We say it's not in our interests. You know, Israel has killed like, yeah, I think someone mentioned like over 17,000 Palestinians in Gaza in a month, in the span of a month, which with so much support from the United States. And we're seeing that, you know, both from the Republicans and the Democrats. So, I mean, it's like, I think, yeah, absolutely essential that we take a stand here and in general with all these kinds of issues. And like Tony said, this is not some aberration. You know, the UAW international leadership just released a statement calling for a permanent ceasefire. But also historically, workers have, you know, done things like gone on political strikes, you know, to oppose like US involvement in wars and things of that nature. So just wanted to like explain a little more, yeah, at least my thoughts on why like we really have to struggle against this idea that like no politics in the union activism.
Yeah, and this like goes back like this question, like this sort of perspective of like if workers should be focused on these issues, like dates back to the 1800s and before. Like this was a big discussion in the lead up to the like Russian Revolution between workers. And you know, it's interesting because TDU did start off as with members from the International Socialist, and you can see sort of like where this question is not just something that we think that just appeared like this past month or anything, but this really is, like I said, been hundreds and hundreds of years of a big debate. And the way I see it is, well, capitalism is still around, right? So like how far has that gotten us if we don't continue to thing that I thought was really good from the that happened during the resolutions was the fact that even after the arguments were made to table it, like taking it to a vote was motioned by workers. Originally, that wasn't going to happen, and then we did just like a oral yay and nay, and then another worker who's not that first worker who motioned to vote asked for us to make like a more accurate, can we do like a hand raising? And I think that this was probably like some of the more actual like democratic like examples of democracy that I think we really got to see. And I think like it's notable that that came from you know, workers in the crowd who were also daring to go against the grain. They didn't have a, you know, a Teamster Mobilize shirt plastered on them, but
Yeah, I can speak to the process a little bit. So as we mentioned, after we read our resolutions, Frank Halstead, speaking for the convention committee and also a prominent member of the TDU steering committee, made a motion to table both of the resolutions. And we discussed before that according to the TDU rules of the convention, that motions to table are not debatable. So we weren't able to actually put forward our views on whether or not our resolution should be tabled indefinitely. Although Frank Halstead was able to put forward his views as to why they should be tabled, which I think was quite unfair. But yes, a motion to table these resolutions requires a simple majority vote according to the TDU rules of the convention. Typically in Robert's rules, I think a 2/3 majority is required to table a resolution, which is meant to make it more difficult for people just to, you know, shove aside things that they don't want discussed in a meeting. So the chair, you know, after this motion was made to table our resolutions, the chair called for an audible vote on both resolutions together. The question was, should, you know, vote yes if you think that these resolutions should both be tabled, and there was an audible vote taken, yay or nay. But as Colleen mentioned, some workers, some TDU members stood up for our resolutions and that the resolutions be voted on separately, that you know, a simple voice vote should be taken on both of the resolutions separately. It was clear from the simple voice votes that it was rather close. And so another TDU member stood up in support of our, you know, resolutions requiring or asking that the vote be taken by hand. So then the vote to table the resolutions were each taken separately by hand. And both resolutions were tabled by a majority vote.
I just wanted to say really quickly also that We've heard that so not only like in terms of who was in the room at the time, not only were a lot of people not there due to it being at the end of the convention, but also that some steering committee members or other people on leadership had gone around to tell people specifically to come to vote these resolutions down. Not clear how much of that was just by, by actual the content of the resolutions, but also by virtue of the resolutions being put forward by Teamsters Mobilize. But so that's like an added factor, I guess, to the situation.
Yeah, I think what this showed for me, I mean, I think it's quite ridiculous that that we weren't able to debate these resolutions before the floor, given that they had, some support among the TDU membership, even that was there on that final day.
Yeah, and I think like this sort of, I alluded to that there have been, different sections of worker organizations or worker activists or groups as such as like the International Socialists, which Ken Path comes from, who really believe that this, that it's the correct strategy to be so rigid. And unfortunately, we did get to see sort of firsthand this like trickle down to the point where I know that there's workers and people there who I talked to throughout the weekend or previously about their positions around Palestine. Some people who have even attended different Labor for Palestine calls and have attended plenty of actions and protests and will scream from the river to the sea very loudly in certain settings, but ended up voting to also in favor of tabling it. And I would just like to say to that we do have the ability to change our thinking and our outlooks in general. And I share this not to shame people as maybe posers or like two-faced or anything like that, but I really urge you to consider what we have to say and maybe talking to us more individually or to really reconsider if this strategy is correct. And yeah.
The strategy being of tabling it, right?
The strategy of keeping politics and workplace things completely separate. Yeah, I think that we can learn and change our ideas and hopefully over time there can be some struggle between all of us around this question, because that's really going to hold us back, I think, if we see ourselves as workers as needing to like be able to be open about certain politics in some settings, but then even in these like reform caucuses like TDU, like kind of abandoning maybe your beliefs that you have in a different group or something. And I think we saw that firsthand, like I sort of explained. And for those who were at the convention, and yeah, yeah, I know my voice might seem like pretty low leveled, but I'm trying to figure out how to inspire. We need some of that in this.
All right. Maybe we should move on to the next questions.
Yes. So, and then, so, so after all of sort of these experiences, should we continue to engage with TDU? What do people think about that?
We have discussed this over and over and over again, and I'm sure other people will want to jump in with their own viewpoints. Going back to what Jess said earlier about TDU not putting forth resolutions that were industry specific, everyone on this call is a part-time UPSer, and the issue we have framed our issues like pay parity around tiers across the industry. But there are things that are very particular to our jobs as part-time UPSers. And I feel that TDU, by basically refusing to take up industry-specific resolutions, has essentially said, you're on your own, kids. Yeah, we can't help you. So for me, TDU and Teamster Mobilize are essentially on we have different goals and different missions. We are completely separate organizations on two separate tracks, actually. TDU is about educating shop stewards, which they do very well, and organizing shop floors. And that's great. That's wonderful. I want educated shop stewards out there defending part-time UPSers with everything they got. But Teamster Mobilize is more about focusing on the whole system as a whole. Yes, part-timers need to be defended by educated shop stewards, but hey, what about all these other issues? Like pay parity being the huge one, but there's, our pensions, I won't sidetrack the conversation by listing all the different issues that part-timers need help on, but that's what Teamster Mobilize is interested in, improving the conditions of the working lives of part-timers. And so for me, TDU, the convention is for meeting people, making connections, going to very informative workshops. But as far as TDU being helpful towards our mission, that's not what they're interested in. They've chosen to go in a completely different direction, which also shows why Teamsters Mobilize needs to exist.
You can go ahead first, Sean.
Yes, I think in terms of, like what Jennifer was saying, like we saw, there's a clear need for us to continue our organizing as Teamsters Mobilize. We see like a vacuum basically within our union of like an organization that's really willing to take strong stances to push forward like the struggle of Teamsters, which means, of course, including taking stances against kind of corrupt union leadership, which includes taking political stances. And we've just discussed a lot about like how TDU has not been doing that, especially, particularly in the last like 2 years. Well, the political stances is, that's from the start. But in terms of like, really being critical of the union leadership. But I think, we talked about this a little bit on the What the Heck show. We've described how, there's some sections of the TDU leadership that are very clearly opposed to like any basic struggle, anything that's going to compromise their position, especially right now, having, pretty high up positions within the IBT. But we know there's a lot of people in TDU, as people have mentioned, like meeting a bunch of people who are serious about the fight. And so I think a lot of us think it makes sense to, be TDU members, be going to the conventions, be trying to put forward these resolutions, pushing for certain campaigns, which we're not going to rely on TDU to take up. The things that we're putting forward, such as the Palestine resolution, the open bargaining, pay parity, these are all things that we have a plan to organize around, and we're going to do that. But, TDU is an organization spanning our union, including many people who do want to fight for progressive change. So of course we're going to try to work within TDU to, make that happen and push those things forward. So those are my thoughts on our continued engagement with TDU.
Yeah, and I think realistically, we do know that part of their current strategy is to have TDU slates across all the locals. They're pretty explicit about that. So I think this question of our engagement in TDU, if it continues on that track, is very similar to, Chantel, you said on the What the Heck show, to how we relate to the IBT in general. I mean, if they eventually do end up growing, because they technically are growing in an increasing way, there's kind of no avoiding it as well. Them being a part of this struggle, they clearly are, and we can't avoid them, which I don't think we have. But just on the topic of whether we choose to engage with them or not. And then, go ahead, Chantal.
I was just going to say really quickly, I think it's kind of an open question as to the future of TDU, because, we know that there's pretty cemented sections of the leadership which are opposed to basic struggle. But I know that there's other people involved who do want to push for struggle. I know there's people who were at the convention who were saying they disagreed with TDU's stance on the UPS contract, who have aired that, who think that TDU should be taking better stances. So yeah, I think that's an open question, but we know at present there's a need, for a real opposition organization fighting for the interests of the workers in Teamsters, and that's why we exist. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Sorry. Thanks, Chantel. And so, given everything we've been discussing, it does call into question, what do we think a democratic organization looks like? And before we even answer that, what is our evaluation of TDU as a democratic organization? So it's kind of that second one should actually be first. Yeah, is TDU a democratic organization? And then, if it's not, which I know we don't, what do we think that the democratic organization should look like?
Yeah, I think our experience in the Amazon organizing workshop is really illustrative in this respect. And I want to start off by saying it's absolutely crucial to support the efforts to organize Amazon. I mean, it's one of the largest capitalist monopoly corporations in the world. It's totally impossible to separate the track of where our pay and working conditions are going to go as UPSers with the conditions that Amazon workers are facing, just due to the nature of the small number of really powerful, wealthy people who control the entire logistics industry. And I know that we are all, in full support of the struggle of Amazon workers in that respect. out of solidarity. And in the workshop, I had raised my hand at the end in the Q&A session and asked, I've heard a few instances of organizers within the Teamsters Amazon campaign getting fired for taking dissenting stances. What do you think that this implies about the democratic nature of Teamsters, IBT, and specifically the Amazon campaign? And it was this question, you could tell, made people kind of look a little sideways, look a little nervous, and somebody on the panel said, oh, that was just one person. Too bad. Let's move on. Colleen raises her hand a few questions later and says, could we come back to this question? I think it's important to understand the nature of this campaign and evaluate it critically. I mean, Teamsters for a Democratic Union has always been an organization that evaluates IBT critically. And Rand Wilson, the facilitator of that workshop, absolutely just shut it down at that point. He was like, we're not talking about this. Next question. Another worker who wasn't in TM raised his hand. He wanted to know, what are these girls talking about? And, it was just, it was a crackdown. There was this kind of a shadow ban on even considering this issue. And I think that, what are we trying to do here? Are we trying to smear the Amazon campaign? No, we're trying to ask, okay, if I am a worker in UPS and I think it's important to organize Amazon, and I think that ultimately the Union for Amazon Workers should be a democratic institution, I want to know if the efforts to even get those workers in the union in the first place are being operated in a democratic manner. Because how can we have hope for the future of the union if the seeds are not even healthy? And I think that this gets a little bit to the question of okay, well, what does a democratic organization look like? Does it just look like, okay, every few years we have a vote on a contract or on an officer and everybody shows up and fills out the ballot and then the majority wins? Well, that's part of democracy. That is a necessary component of democracy, but that's not what the entire idea of democracy can be reduced to. There's a lot more to it than that. There's all of the discussions that go into us deciding what are we even considering on this ballot or in this vote. There's all of the debates where people can air their disagreements. People could ask questions that might be a little bit uncomfortable. People could state openly that they disagree and not get fired from their organizing position. All of these things are absolutely crucial, I think, to ultimately getting to that place where you vote and everybody's fully informed and has at least had the chance to get an objective picture of what the situation is. And I wanted to just read a little bit, a really quick quote from this book that I've been reading, The Politics of U.S. Labor, because I think that it's good to study our labor history, about the GM, General Motors, sit-down strike in the late 1930s, which was one of, if possibly not the most important industrial strike in the history of this country. And I think that it just kind of touches on what does that kind of democratic practice look like. So the author writes, it was the extraordinary organization and solidarity of the workers that made the GM strike successful. At Fisher Body Plant Number 1, a strike committee of 17 constituted the chief administrative body, whose decisions were subject to daily checkup of membership meetings. These meetings were like the town hall gatherings of a basic democratic society. The entire life of the sit-down strike came into review here, and most of its ideas and decisions originated on the spot. All the strikers were organized into groups of 15, each headed by a steward. The groups generated the warmth of families, and Henry Krauss quotes one worker after the strike was settled as saying, "The first 3 days after the strike before the plant reopened were the lonesomeness of my life." So kind of trying to allude to the fact that like all of this really rich like debate and meeting and discussion really cultivated a real community amongst workers who were involved in the strike. And I think that us in Teamsters Mobilize really have been able to cultivate that in a great way. And I'm excited to bring more people in and continue organizing together and trying to like constantly develop our own democratic practices. I think that it's possible, and I have great faith in the working people of the U.S. and the world that they do have the knowledge and the will to engage in our struggles in that way.
Does anyone else want to? That was well said, Kat. And I feel like there could be maybe some more to be said about what went on in the workshop, but I feel like you just ended that on a pretty good note. But would anyone else like to, kind of share what they think is like emblematic of like genuine democracy, or do people feel good?
I just wanted to bring up that within TDU, there is a steering committee, but in practice, the steering committee does not hold a lot of the power. They do make general decisions, kind of guiding the direction of TDU. But in practice, in the day-to-day, a lot of the power is held by David Levine. I think it's the executive organizing director, maybe is the official term. But this leader and this team, they are not elected, right? They are appointed. Levine has been appointed, I believe, by Ken Paff, kind of handpicked and selected, and that is indefinite, right? David Levine could possibly be in this position until he no longer wants to be. So for it to be a democratic organization and some of the leadership not be elected just doesn't really align with that. Yeah. And even people that are on the steering committee and have been on the steering committee in the past, they tell you that it's very limited power on the steering committee, and that's where a lot of the power lies, and that power is not elected by the people. And we believe that the voice of the membership should always prevail. If your leaders, if what's coming out of their mouth is not representative of the people and their beliefs on the shop floor, then something needs to change. And we want to make sure that the voice of the people are heard, from the lowest ranks of the part-timers, even this disgusting view and attitude that they painted with the people that were starting after the contract, right? They were the unborn. They actually labeled them this in one of the drafts of the TA. They were the unborn, and over the life of the contract, their wage is going to go up $2, while the rest of us is going to go up $4.25, or maybe even $4.75. I can't remember. But it's way more. And the idea, in my opinion, the union mentality is supposed to be that, we have a sense of obligation to leave it better than we found it, right? So that the next person that walks in the door, they don't have to deal with some of the same struggles that we've always had to deal with, right? They have it a little bit better. So, we believe that, you've got the next person's back before they've ever walked in the door. So to push the idea of the people that are coming in next getting less, and the idea that we should all support that and be okay with that. Like we need to call that out, because we don't support that. We're not okay with that. You know, that's not my opinion of what a union mentality is. Whether you think you have an obligation or not, we all do. Because my dad always said that, you know, it's progress is like climbing a rope, right? You're not going to stay in one spot for long. You're either going up or you're coming back down. So we're either fighting for better and we're slowly climbing that rope, or if we don't do shit, we're going down. We're falling off that rope. So it's important to call out those things that we disagree with, and, you know, push back against those ideas that have kind of been forced onto us essentially our whole lives. You know, we've all been living in this capitalist society, and many of these ideas come from people that benefit from us thinking that way, and benefit financially to keep us down and to make us believe those own ideas. So yeah, it's just really important to push back against that. And it says, Tony is saying that Levine.
I'm happy just to speak on that point.
Yeah, go ahead, Tony. You take that.
Oh yeah. Yeah, no, I appreciate what you said. Those are great points. Yeah. I think what you're highlighting in the first part of what you said is that through our experience at the TDU convention and many other TDU members that we even talked to at the convention, that TDU has a lot of anti-democratic practices within it. You know, many TDU members that aren't members of Teamsters Mobilize that came up to us and were at the convention and were, you know, expressed that they thought what happened was unfair when it came to the resolutions and how we were treated in general at the convention. And your point about your point was made that TDU is essentially a staff-directed organization, whereas there is a steering committee that meets quarterly. Many decisions are made by the TDU staff, in particular TDU staff director David Levine. Yeah, I just wanted to make a small correction that although he's been in that position for a very long time, he's not perpetually appointed by Ken Paff and by founding members of TDU, but he's technically appointed by each TDU steering committee. But of course, in practice, Levine's long tenure as the staff director has shown that there isn't a lot of ability for TDU members to change the direction of TDU when it's needed.
I was just going to make a very brief comment, which is I really agree with what everyone has said, and I think, like Kat was mentioning, just like the vital importance, like, of course we have to like debate and discuss, like, what is it that we're doing? Like, how are we actually working to advance like the struggle of the working class in the US? I mean, we have to talk about how to do that. And I think, you know, like some of the criticism or I think unfair criticism, inaccurate criticism leveled against many of us and others who participated in like Vote No, was that we're like trying to break the union or like we're against the union. And I think that's obviously not true. I mean, we're trying to like push forward actually, like what is our union doing? You know, we're trying to push forward the struggle of the of Teamsters members. And we can't pretend like there's no disagreement or conflict or contradictions amongst Teamsters. I mean, we all have different ideas, you know, like we have disagreements about all kinds of things, but so we can't pretend like that's not there. And then especially we can't just say then, oh, well, leadership knows best, you know? So whether or not it's the IBT or it's TDU or, you know, any other group or organization. So yeah, I just really agree. Like we have to be able to debate and discuss these things. And you know, I've been very glad to see that, like I know you all experienced this at the TDU convention, and I've experienced this at my own building and local, which is that many people would say to me, I may not agree with everything that you're saying, but I think you have the right to say it. And it's not right when you're being shut down. So I do think that that's like a fairly common idea that people have, you know, in this country, which is a good thing. So yeah.
All right. So do we have any sort of concluding remarks? Yeah, go ahead, Kat.
I'll just say, overall, I came away from the convention feeling very energized, very inspired by the people that I met and the discussions that we shared together, which were very diverse in the kind of like topics and positions and whatnot that people took, but were overall infused with a really strong desire to fight for better for ourselves and our coworkers and working people at large, not just Teamsters, but everywhere. And you know, we did face some pretty sharp repression from TDU leadership, but I feel that although it's good to name that, understand that, and be able to move forward from that, that like my dominant experience was a good one, and I think laid the foundation for a lot of really amazing and positive work moving forward. So that's kind of like my TLDR from the TDU convention this year.
And what is TDLR?
Too long, didn't read.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was like, there's gonna be, I don't know what that means. There's gonna be others who don't know what that means. Okay. And as far as yeah, I was just gonna ask who's doing the call to action.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
and I just wanted to add to what Kat said. I'm the same. The connections made with people there, so many like-minded people, so many people that have great ideas for our union and want to fight to better our union. Yeah, it was inspiring to see that. It was great to meet all of us. I think as far as what we wanted to accomplish at TDU, it couldn't have went much better. I think it went about as good as we had hoped for. And I'm happy with the way things went. I think that we went for the right reasons, and you know, we executed those things, and it was a really great experience for most of us there. You know, like Kat said, call out, you know, the things that need to be called out, and you know, bring attention to what was good. And yeah, it was a great experience. I would probably go back again if we decided that, you know, we should do that. And, you know, as far as if we're going to continue to engage with TDU, I feel like as long as TDU is relevant to the Teamsters, then it's relevant for us to be there. But yeah, we just wanted to put out a little bit of call to action. The resolutions that we've discussed here on this call, we have heard that they will be heard at the next TDU steering committee meeting in January. So there is the potential that one or all of them could still be adopted. If anyone is in favor of those resolutions and supportive of that, reach out to TDU, call, email. If you know somebody on the steering committee, tell them like, hey, you know, I really support this resolution. I think it's important that we take a stand on this. Yeah, push for that. You know, put your voice in, make sure that your voice is heard in case that can have an impact on TDU adopting these resolutions in January. There is also the matter of the 4-6 punch right now going on in, I think we have identified like 7 locals that are still being forced in on their scheduled day home outside of their normal scheduled work week. In general, the members and the locals are being told by the IBT package division to stand down, to work now and grieve later. I believe that that is the wrong approach. I believe that we should have already heard from the IBT that they should have already put out an official stance. I believe that they should be using some of those dollars that they use to shove the contract down our throat. I think that they should be using some of those funds to expose UPS for exactly what they are, exploiting our families even further during the holiday season around protections that they have already earned. They should not still be fighting this fight. We've already won this fight. They need to be exposing this company, dragging their ass publicly, online, in the media, and letting the company know that any attack against our members is going to be met with equal and overwhelming force, and that they need to stand down, because we're not standing down. We're going to step up and we're going to do whatever it takes to make sure our contract is enforced and that our members' rights are respected. You know, if your local's not dealing with this, great. My local's not dealing with this. This is not a part-timer issue, but this is a Teamster issue. And when you fight to advance the issues of Teamsters, you're fighting for all Teamsters. These are our brothers and sisters. Part-timers did not get 4-6 punch protection, unfortunately. But for those that did, we want to make sure that they get that. Right? And we want to have their back in this fight, regardless of if it's our fight in our building. So I encourage all Teamsters to support this fight. You can go on our website. We put out some materials around the 4-6 punch. It is not hard to find that campaign. A lot of members in Local 639 have actively took this up. We are not heading this up. We are listening to the voice of the rank and file that are affected. We are doing this at their direction. They have asked, they have put out calls to action. They want people to take up this fight with them. So we want to have their back with that. We also have a general membership meeting coming up next Sunday, December 17th. Is that right? We will also be putting out some blast around that. Please join the call. We will also be doing a bigger membership call in January, finalizing our organizational structure and exactly what membership looks like. So those are some fun things happening behind the scenes for us. But yeah, we want this to be a fighting union. Every single person can have a voice. No person is too small. Regardless of how they try to make you feel on your shop floor or they try to make you feel in your local. And yeah, we want everybody to be a part of this fight. And if you don't know where to start, that's okay. We welcome you. You can start with coming to us and saying, hi, this is what's going on my shop floor. Because you can have a part of impacting change, even if it is only on your shop floor, even if it is only in your work area, even if you only change your own circumstances, like you start there and you can help change your circumstances, the other people on your shop floor, your local union. There is no end point. You can take it as far as you want. And that's what we want, because as Teamsters, we believe that an injury to one is an injury to all. So my mentality is if you fuck with one of my Teamsters, it's like you're fucking with me. So I'm gonna have your back. Because we need more people to stand up, because the fight against this company and against capitalism, it's never gonna end until we all take up the fight. So we have to empower everybody, because we truly do all have to unite around these common issues to advance this struggle and overcome these things.
Super well said, Jess. And then one more thing is we also have been number of Teamsters Mobilize members have been organizing around Palestinian solidarity work in our locals. Colleen and I are working with some coworkers here in Local 70 who want to take a stand, and sometimes it can feel isolating, but if you are just like looking for people to talk to or guidance or ideas of where to start, we're also definitely down to collaborate on that as well. So encourage folks to reach out.
I would just say, like, a last thing, I mean, similar to what Jess was saying about there were Teamsters in Local 639 who've been organizing against this 4-6 punch. And, you know, I know there's people all around the country who are organizing, in their shop floor, in their local, trying to start national campaigns against all the various things we need to be organizing against. So, like, if people are already doing that, which I know they are, and would like to like share that with us, see what we can do to help kind of spread the word or take that up in some way.
Our website is teamstersmobilize.com. You can find all the stuff that we have just been talking about on our website. There will be a link to it. Do we have any other comments before I cut off the recording?